The Last Express is my all-time favorite computer game. Created by Jordan Mechner, who's best known as the creator of the Prince of Persia franchise, The Last Express was released by Broderbund in 1997 to good reviews but underwhelming sales. However, the game inspired a steady cult following which continues to this day. It's been kept alive by Facebook fan groups, blog articles, interviews with the crew, and even attempts to get a Hollywood film adaptation off the ground. I first played The Last Express in the early 2000s at the age of 10, when my parents gave it to me as a gift, thinking I'd enjoy it because it was billed as a mix of Indiana Jones and Alfred Hitchcock. I immediately became fascinated with the game, although I didn't beat it until I was 14 years old. By that point, I was so enthralled with The Last Express that I became one of many fans committed to the cause of spreading awareness about it. The Last Express, for those of you who've never played it, is a murder mystery set on board the Orient Express on the brink of World War I. You play as Robert Cath, an American doctor who's invited on board the train, arrives late, is forced to sneak on board illegally, and then discovers the dead body of his estranged friend Tyler Whitney inside his compartment. For the rest of the game, you assume the identity of Tyler Whitney as you try to solve the mystery behind his death. It's a combination of several of the great Hollywood classics of the 30s and 40s. You got the train mystery of Hitchcock's The Lady Vanishes, the enigmatic MacGuffin of John Huston's The Maltese Falcon, the maverick hero and foreign cast of characters of Casablanca. The Last Express was conceived by Jordan Mechner when his best friend, Tommy Pierce, suggested he make another game after the huge success of Prince of Persia. While discussing ideas for a follow-up, Pierce asked him, "What about the sentence, 'I was taking the midnight train to Berlin,' which was something she had heard from a history professor at Yale." Pierce thought this could inspire a game about World War II, but Mechner decided instead to make a game about World War I, knowing that this would be more original, and because he was interested in the Art Nouveau style of the period. Mechner has also commented on how World War I was a turning point in history, or, in his own words, an explosion of the repressed shadow energy of all the great powers of Europe, which, for decades, had been at peace and prosperity. That's one way to look at war, after a long period of peace, as an explosion of all the things, all the elements of society that we don't admit, that we feel shouldn't be there. This gave Mechner an opportunity to make a game that was about more than just a simple question of good guys and bad guys. In World War I, there were no true heroes or villains, and The Last Express reflects that. For example, the character of Alexei Dolnikov may be a genocidal Russian anarchist, but we come to realize that he's a romantic who's doing all of this primarily because of his tender love for a young woman. He's a dangerous man, but not a bad man. The same is true of Milos and his band of Serbian terrorists. Sure, you have to fight them later on in the game, but even Cath admits at one point that he's not entirely unsympathetic to their cause. I guess the only truly villainous character in the game is Kronos, a rich man who's motivated by nothing more than his love of great art, and is not above killing for it. But again, this plays into the real-life narrative of World War I, which, far from being a necessary war waged in the name of freedom and justice, was instead a class war, waged in the name of power, politics, and greed. Arguably, it's because of World War I that we ended up getting World War II a couple decades later, and indeed, the game ends on that very note of tension and uneasiness, suggesting that the worst is yet to come. Conversely, the hero, Robert Cath, is not an entirely good guy. While certainly likable, he has a shady past, having been involved in an ambiguous incident in the Irish Troubles which ended with one man's death. He has a little fling with the Austrian spy Anna Wolf, but at one point, when he refuses to comply with her government's demands, she threatens to shoot him and he icily replies, "Go ahead." Ultimately, his motivations in the game are selfish. All he wants to do is find out how Tyler Whitney died and cross the border into Constantinople without being captured by the authorities. The thing about Robert Cath is that he represents what Jordan Mechner has referred to as the eternal bachelor, a guy who's not married, doesn't have kids, has no responsibilities, and lives a life of self-serving simplicity. This actually makes him a great protagonist for a game, because it allows those of us who do live lives of responsibility to roleplay for a little while. To make The Last Express, Jordan Mechner formed the company Smoking Car Productions and assembled a first-rate crew: producer Mark Netter, programmer and technical designer Mark Moran, 3D modeler Donald Graham, technical director Robert Cath, art director Nicole Tostevin, 3D art director Patrick Ladislav, Tommy Pierce, who became the game's co-writer, and dozens of other artists. The game would take 4 years to complete, and the budget would climb up to $5 million. But the money is right up there on the screen. Using the process of rotoscoping, it was all designed to make it look as though you really were walking down the corridors of a train, that you really were being watched by all the passengers around you. It was an innovative game, breaking new ground, achieving things nobody had ever seen in a game before. The more you play The Last Express, the more you'll discover things you may not have noticed on your first playthrough. For example, this past year, I started playing it again, and I suddenly paid special attention to this book in Kronos' private car, which tells a grisly fable about the Sultan Abdul Hamid II murdering his mistress over a terrible misunderstanding involving a mysterious jeweled egg. It's one of those little details which seems unimportant during your first playthrough, but becomes absolutely chilling once you realize its significance in the story. You might also notice some secret Easter eggs during repeated playthroughs of the game. Maybe you'll find a hidden photograph of Jordan Mechner, or maybe you'll experience a nightmare in which the conductor juggles his own severed heads. Now, there's one alleged Easter egg in the game which nobody has ever been able to prove, and which is now widely believed to be impossible. In 1998, an anonymous source informed walkthrough writer Fugazi that there was a way to get inside the compartment of Mahmoud Makta. Apparently, all you have to do is go into August Schmidt's compartment, knock on his washroom door 4 times, turn around and open his gun case, then turn around and open the washroom door, and this should take you into Mahmoud's compartment. The compartment allegedly contains a bunch of memorabilia, such as his golden sword. However, once this Easter egg is done, allegedly it can never be done again. Now, I swear that I remember being able to unlock this Easter egg back when I played the game on my old Windows XP in the 2000s, but I've never been able to do it since. Maybe I imagined the whole thing, but then again, the anonymous source who leaked information about this Easter egg back in 1998 was oddly specific in the way he or she described it, so maybe there is a way to do it. Perhaps it can only be done in an old computer? I don't know, but if there's anyone out there who can prove that this Easter egg is possible, please let me know. When The Last Express finally shipped in May 1997, it got some positive reviews and even some awards, but there was a problem. Broderbund's marketing staff had quit a month before the release, so the game wasn't exactly being marketed. Because of this, the game was only in stores for 2 months. By the end of the summer, it was gone. Ironically, later in the year, Titanic became the biggest box office hit of all time. Like The Last Express, it too was set during the 1910s, and it too was a story about the downfall of the aristocratic class system. It's possible that if The Last Express had been released at the same time as Titanic, it maybe would have sold more copies due to the public's sudden interest in that particular time period, but who knows? Many of the people who worked on The Last Express went on to achieve great things later on in their careers. Producer Mark Netter went on to direct the award-winning independent film Nightmare Code. Programmer and technical designer Mark Moran became the executive producer of Nate Parker's award-winning The Birth of a Nation. Jordan Mechner went on to make Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, which was hugely successful, and what a lot of people don't know is that it recycled the rewinding time device which Mechner had previously used for Last Express. Mechner later co-wrote the screenplay for the 2010 film adaptation of Prince of Persia. That same year, Tommy Pierce passed away, and the film was dedicated to her memory. After the Prince of Persia movie came out, Hollywood seemed briefly interested in adapting The Last Express into a movie as well. In 2010 and 2011, Paul Verhoeven was engaged in talks to direct a film adaptation of The Last Express, and he mentioned the project in a couple of interviews.
I was working with a game inventor, Jordan Mechner, and he wrote another game which was The Last Express, which is situated in 1914. And he just called me that there was an enormous interest in his script now because of the 3D possibilities. Okay. It's on a train. And so being on a train and being in 3D without pushing the 3D, but the fact that you will be more there.
but movies about World War I have always been a tough sell in Hollywood. Certainly there have been some great ones, but I think the main issue has always been, how do you make World War I accessible to the public, when most people today don't even know anything about World War I? It sure would be nice to see a Last Express movie get made someday, but in the meantime, it's up to those of us who are fans to first restore the public's interest in the original game. So, if you're a fan of The Last Express, or if this video makes you want to go out and play it, spread the word. Recommend it to your friends. Tell them to get on the train. They'll enjoy the ride. Thanks for watching.